Hi, I'm Jeremy, the Zoo Nerd, coming to you live from beautiful sunny Los Angeles, where I'm in my backyard. How is everybody doing today? I hope you're happy, I hope you're healthy, I hope you're having some fun, and I hope you're ready to learn a few things. Today in our Critter Chat, we're going to talk about one of the most charismatic groups of animals on the planet. We're going to talk about dolphins. We're also going to talk a little bit about porpoises because they sometimes get lumped into that group, although they are a different family. They share a lot of commonalities, so we'll talk a bit about all of them. For starters, there are between 32 to 38 species of dolphins, and that's kind of because different people like to classify things a little bit differently. And on some species, we're still waiting for further research to be done. But that's a lot of different kinds of dolphins, right? Most people think of dolphins and there may be like, a couple kinds of dolphins, maybe some that live in the Pacific and some that live in the Atlantic and maybe a few others. And maybe you've heard of the river dolphins that live in freshwater. There's actually 4 different species of those around the planet as well. So with the 32 to 38 species of dolphins, and that includes the 4 river species, and then there are 6 species of porpoise. So there's not nearly as many kinds of porpoise, although we will talk a little bit about some of those. To start off with, dolphins and porpoises are mammals. So like the other mammals we've discussed, that means that they have live birth. We haven't yet talked about the ones that don't have live birth, but we'll do an episode on them soon. So live birth, breathe air, they're warm-blooded or maintain their constant body temperature. They have hair, and they feed their babies milk. That's the most mammal thing a mammal does. All mammals do that, no other animals do. So that's the most unique mammal characteristic. So some of those sound kind of confusing a little bit when you think about an animal like a dolphin. It lives entirely in the water all of its life, but yet it has to breathe air. So that means it comes to the surface to breathe air through its nostrils, which are not here, but more here on their body. So that's called a blowhole in a dolphin or a whale, and they are closely related to whales. The dolphins, porpoises, and whales make up a big group of animals called cetaceans. But there's a lot of differences between dolphins and whales, so we'll talk about whales in another episode. And we may even do future episodes on specific species of dolphins, because I think there's a lot of material that can be discussed in talking about them. But the other characteristic of a mammal that seems a little confusing is that they have hair. And some dolphins have a little tiny bit of hair right along by their mouth that are kind of like whiskers. But in general, they're pretty much a sleek animal that doesn't have much hair. Particularly baby dolphins have a little bit more hair than adults, but it is pretty rare that any dolphin has a lot of hair. They're not a furry animal, kind of like the seals are. Dolphins are not. Their skin is much more smooth than that, without much outer covering like hair. Also, dolphins are carnivores. That means they are meat eaters. And the meat that they eat is mostly fish. Now, I say mostly because they do eat some other animals, like shrimp and squid, and occasionally some other animals they would find in the ocean. But most of them, it's primarily fish. Now, there are a couple of exceptions because there always are, and one of those would be the largest of the dolphins, which may surprise you, is actually an animal we call an orca, or a killer whale. It is actually a dolphin. Orcas can be up to 32 feet long, and they can weigh 11 tons. That's 22,000 pounds. So that's more weight, or as much weight as like the biggest elephant that's ever been recorded, and quite a bit longer in length. But orcas are technically in the dolphin family, and they will occasionally eat things other than fish, although most orcas usually eat a lot of fish. Some have specialized to eat other marine mammals like seals and sea lions, and occasionally go after something like another kind of dolphin. That's how they got their name killer whale, and they will occasionally go after babies of some of the big whale species. But dolphins generally have so let's talk about what a dolphin is versus a porpoise. Let's get that out of the way. Dolphins generally have a more elongated beak, or the portion of their face that includes their mouth. They typically have more cone-shaped or kind of rounded, think of them like candy corns. That's kind of what their teeth are like. And they usually have a curved dorsal fin, so it's kind of rounded on the top side of it. And the dorsal fin is the fin that's right in the middle of their back. And dolphins are usually a little more skinny and sleek. They're a little longer and usually a little bit more slim looking. Porpoises, on the other hand, are usually a little shorter and a little more stout, or a little more portly. They are a little bigger around for their size than a dolphin would be. Porpoises are usually shorter, and they usually have a shorter mouth with more spade-like teeth. So their teeth are more pointy. And they usually have triangular dorsal fins. So a dolphin fin kind of curves. A porpoise fin is usually more a triangle on top. Now, both dolphins and porpoises live throughout a lot of portions of the world, but they tend to appreciate warmer waters in general. Again, an exception to that is the orca. Orcas can be found almost every ocean, every habitat globally, and they are definitely a little more willing to live where the water's colder. Orcas are a little more common in both Antarctica and the Arctic areas, whereas other dolphin species tend to be more where it's warm water. We talked about how orcas are the largest of dolphins. Let's talk a little bit about the smallest. So there's kind of two contenders for this, and if we include the porpoises, then it's kind of one way. If we don't include the porpoises, then it's the other. But the smallest of any of them, dolphin or porpoise, is also the most endangered marine mammal on Earth, and that is called a vaquita. Vaquitas are small porpoises that are between 4 and 5 feet long, so they're smaller than I am, tall by quite a bit, and they usually only weigh between 65 to 120 pounds. So they are pretty small little fellas. They are also the most endangered. Part of that is because they only ever lived in a very small area to begin with, and that's the very northern part of a body of water called the Gulf of California. So that's the water that's in between mainland Mexico and Baja, Mexico. So that's that little strip of water that's connected to the Pacific Ocean that kind of comes up almost to where the Mexico border meets the United States border, which is just a little bit further south than like Yuma, Arizona, or right where Mexico, California, and Arizona all come together, just short of that. So they live in the very top of that body of water where there's really good amounts of fish and shrimp that live there, and that is part of why the vaquitas are so endangered, because they continually have been caught in fishermen's nets, and that has been very detrimental to their population. At the last population census that was done in late 2019, there were only about 10 vaquita left. And that sounds really low, and that sounds very scary. It sounds like there may not be a whole lot of hope for them. But they did recently find some babies with the group, and so they are a little hopeful that those babies show maybe some new hope. Now, the fishing gear that they have been most commonly caught in are nets that people are using to fish for the shrimp and other types of fish species in that area, have actually been banned by the Mexican government. So there are laws in place to protect the vaquita. However, those laws have not been very well enforced. And since that body of water is entirely controlled or owned by Mexico, other places can't really come in and enforce the laws. Other groups can't really be there legally to enforce the laws. It's up to the Mexican government to enforce the law. Now, there is a conservation program in the works to try to protect them. And one of the biggest threats that they've faced is that a lot of people don't know the vaquita exists, including people that live and fish in that area. They don't acknowledge it as a species. They don't see any benefit from having them there. And many of the fishermen are just trying to get by to put food on their table for their family and make a little money, because that is their job, to be fishermen. And so it's a very difficult and tricky situation, and we're hopeful that something great will happen to where the vaquita can be saved, but we will see. So aside from the vaquita, the other small species of dolphin is also very endangered, and it is a species of dolphin that lives right off the coast of New Zealand, and it is called Maui dolphins. And they live just off of the North Island of the country of New Zealand. That's an island country kind of near Australia. And their biggest threat is also being caught in fishing gear. These little guys get stuck in fishing gear and often can't get out in time to get their next breath, and then they end up drowning because they can't breathe underwater. They need to be at the surface to breathe. So that's one of the biggest threats that faces all dolphins across the world. The smaller the species are, typically the more difficulty they have with nets. Some of the bigger ones can kind of pull through and get out of a net a little easier, but some of these nets that are used for fishing can cause a lot of harm for a lot of marine life, not just dolphins. All right, let's talk a little bit about my experience with dolphins. Now, although I have worked at several zoos and an aquarium, none of the facilities I have worked with have ever had dolphins as part of their collection. So there's not dolphins in any of the places I've worked. I have not personally worked with a dolphin nor a porpoise. However, I have seen them in a number of places that I have traveled to. The pictures I posted earlier today on both the Instagram and the Facebook profiles were of lawn-beaked common dolphins. Those are a dolphin species that is very common here in Southern California. And those pictures were taken back in 2013 when I went on a boat out of Long Beach to look for dolphins and whales. And we found a lot of dolphins. Those were some of the better photos that I got from that day. Although I didn't take very many, and it's hard to photograph an animal swimming in the water while you are also driving in a boat. It's not always the easiest, so I apologize that those were not the very best photos. When I saw those long-beaked common dolphins, though, we saw hundreds, if not thousands of them that day. And as far as we could see in the ocean, we could see dolphins coming up to the surface and catching breaths and diving back under. They were kind of all around us, in front of us, behind us. Some were swimming right under our boat. We saw moms with their babies. It was really amazing experience to be surrounded by that many dolphins, and to see that many at one time was a really phenomenal opportunity, and one that I will always remember and be very excited about. It was really cool to be able to see them up close because they came right up to the boat and were kind of playing along in the waves that the boat was making in front and behind us. Long-beaked common dolphins can sometimes number in groups of thousands right here off of Southern California. They range up to about the middle of California and are quite common along the coastline of California from, like, say, Monterey Bay down through the coast of Mexico. Now, I've also seen a kind of dolphin called spinner dolphins, and my experience in seeing them has happened in two different places. One was in Hawaii. I was out in a sea kayak just offshore of the big island of Hawaii, and I was paddling across a little bay, and there were some spinner dolphins that were swimming underneath us, and occasionally they would come up out of the water and spin. That's something that is very characteristic of their species. And it's really exciting and fun to be able to watch that as well. And I have seen them do similar things when I was on a cruise ship in Mexico. And as our cruise boat, our big ship, was pulling out of the port, there were a number of spinner dolphins that were jumping over the big waves and spinning around in the air behind the cruise ship as we left port. And those are spinner dolphins. They're really exciting to watch and fairly common in during the daytime in kind of shallower coastal waters. And they are very well known for jumping out of the water and spinning around. I have also seen the biggest species of dolphin, which is the orca, the killer whale. I've seen one. It was by itself in Alaska. Many years ago, I visited Alaska with my family, with my parents and some of my siblings. And as we were going on a ferry boat that connected different cities in Alaska, we were kind of watching for different animals. We saw a lot of eagles flying around. And way off in the distance, I saw the very distinctive, very tall dorsal fin of a killer whale. And then we were able to watch that, most likely a very big male killer whale that was by himself, for about 5 minutes as he swam kind of parallel to the boat, quite a ways off though. He was not very close. And I don't have a photo of that, but I do have a very good memory of seeing that and being very excited. Now, I've also seen another kind of dolphin very often right along the coastline here in Southern California, meaning that I was standing on the shore when I saw these dolphins. And those are called bottlenose dolphins. They're pretty common throughout the world, and you can see them in several places. But I specifically have seen them right off of the beach near Santa Monica here in California, right next to Los Angeles. And I have seen them countless times, and that always is something that's very exciting to me, to think that there are these fairly large marine mammals right off our coastline. Now, I have noticed something with the bottlenose dolphins. If it's a busy day at the beach, if there's a lot of people there, and if there's a lot of noise, like radios or music playing, or if anybody has like drums or guitars that they're playing, and if there's a lot of activity, lots of people in the water, swimming around, those are days I don't see the dolphins. The dolphins are very much aware of the people, and the days I see dolphins are days that there's a lot less people around. And the dolphins would be more willing to come closer to shore or be in areas when there are less people around. They are smart animals. They know that they will be safer if there's not as many people around. And a lot of research has been done on dolphins and their ability to hear. And their range of hearing is much greater than ours. So they can probably hear things at a higher frequency than us, and definitely a lower frequency than us. And some of the noises that we make as people, including noises that come from like machinery and cars and loud boats, all of those noises can very much disturb those animals to where they would definitely want to move further away. And so if we're at the beach and having fun with friends and maybe being a little loud, the dolphins are going to remove themselves. They're going to swim to another area where there aren't so many people around, because they know that it's better for them. And I sometimes feel the same way. If it's noisy with neighbors around, I sometimes will go in my house or whatever. So I don't blame them for that. Now let's talk a little bit about dolphin numbers. So of the many species of dolphins, most of them are not listed as endangered or threatened. Now some are, and some are regionally listed as endangered, particularly some of the dolphins that live in the Gulf of Mexico were harmed by the big oil spill that happened there a few years ago, and they have had some respiratory issues because of that, and also it's caused some reproductive issues. And then there's some populations along like Florida that have been hurt by people, by construction of different things, and also other factors that have made the population of dolphins in localized areas struggle a bit more. Here along the West Coast, California, Oregon, and Washington, most of our resident dolphin populations are very healthy. There's a lot of them and they're doing quite well. That doesn't mean that people don't cause harm to them, because that does happen. But it seems to be that they're doing a little better in the Pacific Ocean along the United States than on the Atlantic side of the country. Now, in other countries, sometimes people are very cruel to dolphins. Dolphins are still hunted for different purposes in some parts of the world. Some of that includes people hunting them to eat. Sometimes people will hunt them and cut them up in pieces and use them as bait to catch other things. And there's numerous other things that people have done for hunting dolphins. As I mentioned earlier, dolphins can struggle a lot from getting entangled in fishing gear. So that is usually nets, but it sometimes is also fish hooks and fish line. Sometimes that gets wrapped around the dolphin and can cause very severe cuts on their skin. Sometimes, like I said, human disturbance and noise have caused problems. Specifically, one of those has been with military and large cargo ships, and there have been a lot of scientists who have done a lot of research and work along that, especially in California. Here, just south of Los Angeles, the Port of Los Angeles and the Port of Long Beach and San Pedro, which all kind of function together, that is one of the busiest ports in the entire world. It's for sure the busiest port in the United States. With the number of ships that come in and out, they have put in very special regulations of where the boats can go as they're coming in and out of the port. And they have made those decisions based on the places that dolphins and also the whales and other marine life use, so that they could disturb them less. And I'm very thankful that our government has made some very strict laws to protect the animals like the dolphins and the other marine mammals that live there. Now, there are some other threats that people have caused as well. One of those is something that's still a little unsure how it's really happening, but it's diseases that dolphins can catch that kind of originate on land. One of those is a disease called toxoplasmosis, and that's a big disease that can be caused from or spread through the poop of house cats, which is kind of crazy. I don't know if that's the way that the dolphins are getting it or if it's caused by other things, but I do know that house cats can cause a very big problem with that disease, toxoplasmosis, and that can sometimes affect people as well. So that's something that is kind of pet and human and possibly pollution related that can cause problems for dolphins. Another health issue that dolphins often struggle with is something called a biotoxin. If you've ever heard of red tide or algae blooms, these are all kind of related. They're same sort of things. And that is indirectly caused by people. So algae is something that occurs naturally in the ocean, and some algae is very good and helps the ecosystem, like giant kelp is an algae. But some algae can be very poisonous and toxic, and it can deplete essential nutrients and cause a lot of harm to other animals living in the area. Red tide is caused by one of these algae that gets really highly potent blooms. Think of it kind of like a tree with lots of flowers. That may cause allergies to people. When this algae grows and blooms like that tree, it can cause a lot of problems for the marine animals, the ocean animals that live in that area. Red tide has been a big issue recently in Florida and some of the other states around the Gulf of Mexico and up the eastern coast of the United States. So mostly in Florida, but a little bit Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi, and Texas have all had troubles with red tide. Now, the way that that is partially related to humans is those algae tend to grow faster and be more aggressive with their toxins when the ocean, the water temperatures are higher. And rising ocean water temperatures is commonly happening around the world. The ocean is increasingly getting warmer and warmer each year, and that is caused by people. That is caused, again, by climate change, which we are causing by our use of many types of energy, specifically gasoline, burning coal, and natural gas all cause pollution in the air, which causes then the air temperature to rise, which then causes the earth temperature to rise and the water temperature to rise. And all that temperature rise causes bad things like red tide and algae blooms, and that can cause very painful situations for a lot of marine animals and can kill them. That was the case in Florida maybe 1 or 2 summers ago, that there was really bad red tide, lots of dead fish, dead turtles, dead seabirds, dead dolphins, all caused by red tide, which is indirectly caused by people through climate change. Now, another big problem that dolphins and many marine animals face is from pollution and oil spills. So we need oil to make gasoline so we can drive our cars. Some places also use oil as fuel to heat houses. But in hunting for that oil and searching for that oil, we have found that there's sometimes a lot of oil just under the ocean floor, and we put oil wells out in the ocean, and sometimes those oil wells have mechanical failures, and we leak thousands and millions of gallons of oil out into the ocean, and that can cause big problems for all marine life. There was a huge one that happened in just off the coast of Louisiana and Texas a few years ago. There was a giant one up in Alaska many years ago that is still having problems up there, and they're happening around the globe all the time. And our final threat that we are causing for dolphins and other marine animals is boat strikes. So that's especially common where there's lots of boats. Sometimes those are the big boats like that the military uses, or cruise ships, or lost connection, hope we're back. But it's also very common that that happens with people with smaller boats. In particular, places like Florida, where there's a lot of people out on the water using motor boats and going around and driving through shallow waters where dolphins may be fishing and hunting for their food. That often causes problems for not only dolphins, but other marine animals like sea turtles and manatees and whales as well. So what can we do? How can we help out dolphins and some of these other marine mammals? There's a lot of different things we can do to help. So one of those, the first problem we talked about was getting stuck in fishing gear. And we can all help that out. If you eat seafood, which I do, I love to eat seafood. I think it's delicious. I've eaten seafood several times this week. So what I try to do is make sure that the seafood I eat is sustainably caught. What that means is that it's caught in a way that doesn't harm the wild population of that species. So they're not taking too many. If it's shrimp, they're not taking all the shrimp. If it's salmon, they're not taking all the salmon. If it's cod, tuna, whatever. But also, you make sure that you're not harming other species in the process. So they have to kind of sign a waiver that says they're not hunting other species. So that would include like our little vaquita friends, the porpoises in Mexico that are getting caught in fishing nets. If those were sustainable fishing practices happening, they would make sure that they weren't using those nets that could cause harm to vaquitas, and they would use other ways to catch that seafood that wouldn't be harming those animals. There's usually a little logo on the packaging if you're buying the fish at the store, or if you're going to a market where it's sold fresh. You can usually ask the people who are selling the fish. There's also a really cool app you can get for your phone called the Seafood Watch that is provided by our good friends at the Monterey Bay Aquarium. It helps you to make good choices whether you're at a restaurant or in a grocery store and you're buying fresh seafood. Another way that we can all help out the ocean is reduce, reuse, recycle. I'll say that as many times as I need to. That's an easy way we can do things that limit the amount of trash that ends up in the ocean, specifically plastics. If you drink a lot of bottled water, try using a reusable water bottle instead, and fill it up from a water filtration, from a water fountain, many different sources of water that you can use in a reusable bottle instead of using bottled water all the time. Same with sodas, or make sure you recycle those bottles or cans. Don't just let them go into the trash. For sure, don't throw them down on the street. Here in California, I know that I try to be extremely cautious. Before any rainstorm, I take extra time to clean up around my house, to sweep, to clean up any spilled chemicals that might be around, because as soon as it rains here in California, the rain pushes all of that trash, all of that chemical, all of that pollution into the river, and then it ends up in our ocean within a day or two. And then it causes big problems for a lot of our local marine animals, but that can also cause problems for us long term, as we eat so many of the fish and shellfish, shrimp, clams, oysters, any of that good stuff that comes right off our coastline. We want to make sure that we're keeping the planet healthy for us and for the other animals who live here. And then finally, the other thing we can do is to limit our use of resources that contribute to climate change. So again, if you're going shopping in your car, try to go to all your stores at once. That's also very important right now during COVID-19 pandemic, as you try to limit your amount of time where you're out in society. Try to go to all your stores in one trip. You'll limit your use of gasoline, but you'll also spend less time out amongst other people. So I hope that those are some tips that can help us all out. I'll probably do future episodes where we talk about some of these species in a little more depth. I hope you've enjoyed what I've shared with you about dolphins today, and I'll be sharing some more information on the Facebook profile later on. So check that out later on today. And our special shout out is actually a government organization called the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Those are kind of all big words. So they go by an acronym, which is just a bunch of letters, NOAA, NOAA. They sometimes call that NOAA, but they have a lot of good information. I'll be putting a link up later where you can kind of scroll through and look at the different pictures of each of the species of dolphins and porpoises. Although not all the global species are on there, all the species that exist in the United States waters are on there. And it's got a lot of really good information. I'll also be putting up some videos that I can find later on the Facebook profile. As always, feel free to like, share, subscribe, and follow Zoo Nerd across all platforms of Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, where full episodes of this Critter Chat are uploaded every day. And until tomorrow, be happy, be healthy, take care of yourself, have fun, and I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks. Bye.